The boarding pass with my name and his seat. The boarding pass lay on the tray table like it had landed there on its own. Not my seat, not my flight. Same name, though Miles Parker, and a gate I knew well, the domestic wing's glassy spine where everyone pretends time is a line. The seat number was the insult. 14C, that's the aisle Theo takes when he wants to leave early without saying it out loud. Under my name, the airline had printed a second, a guest attached to the reservation the way you attach a limb to a memory. Guest, Rowan Hale. I fix letters for a living. I spend my days convincing an O to behave without forcing it, laying gold that breathes more than it brags, scraping old paint off glass, and letting yesterday's hand show through just enough to be truthful. Theo curates exhibitions, and the kind of narrative that keeps donors from deciding museums are just storage closets with opinions. We live in an apartment that knows our arguments and forgives them on Tuesdays. We are not married. We are the kind of together that has a key each and a ritual for putting glasses of water on the table before saying the sentence that changes a day. The boarding pass wasn't from my printer. The font on the name was too cheerful, the paper too white, the crease too careful. On the back, along the torn edge, a single tight line in a hand I recognized from the flap of a hotel matchbook last winter. If you still want the truth, Concourse Lounge 6. The lounge sits above the gate like a balcony that learned humility. People go there to pretend their departures are more considerate than everyone else's. The attendant at the desk looked at my face, looked at the pass, and waved me in with the kind of mercy you give to a person who has paid in other currencies. He waited for me to ask where the bar was. I didn't. I know the geography of rooms where the furniture already has opinions. Rowan stood near the window with his back to the glass. He was the kind of tall that denies you the easy comfort of judging. He wore a jacket that made the air behave, the collar open just enough to imply he understood a shoulder blade's potential. He smelled like cedar and a lobby that had rehearsed wanting. When he saw me, he did not smile, which allowed me the small cruelty of liking his face. "You brought me a boarding pass with my name and your seat," I said, keeping my voice inside the carpet's guidance. "I brought you the room," he said, and stepped aside so the city could line up behind him like a witness. "Theo will be 10 minutes. He thinks there is a polite way to end this. I am tired of pretending endings have manners." He didn't touch me. He didn't offer a hand. He placed a glass of water on the side table like he'd learned something from a previous life and wanted me to know. He held his own glass with the light grip of someone who refuses to win by squeezing. "How long?" I asked, because I didn't deserve anesthesia and he didn't deserve to perform. 8 months, he said, and his mouth didn't pretend it liked the number. The first time started with an elevator and rain and a lobby that sells permission. The second time started because I remembered his laugh. The sixth time started because he sent me a photo of your breakfast, and I decided to audition for a future that didn't exist. Cedar has the indecency of smelling like absolution. In the glass, his throat moved when he swallowed, and I felt it in mine. The nearness of him made my skin write sentences my ethics would edit. He saw the edit. He didn't try to argue with it. He set his palm on the railing in the posture of a man who knows gravity and hates metaphors. "You could have just left," I said. "You could have made me the villain of your relief." "I could have," he said, and his voice flicked softer at the edges. "Then I'd be another man who loved someone else's beginning and forgave himself by pretending it was an accident. You deserve the heat and the fluorescent light and the sound the ice machine makes when it thinks no one is listening. You deserve to decide." He took a step closer without closing anything. He watched my mouth the way men do when they are trying to tell the truth and their bodies offer translations. He stopped just short of my wrist. Erotic is not a verb for skin alone. It is a decision kept waiting long enough to say it counts. "You look at me like a painter looks at a frame," he said, and shook his head once at himself, as if the simile had embarrassed him. "You look long enough to tell the truth and short enough not to ruin it." I sighed because I didn't trust my laugh. He dipped his chin and for a moment let his breath be something I could learn from. That was the most dangerous part. Not the look, not the cedar, the curriculum hidden in breath. Theo came in with the face that has charmed curators out of arguing and donors out of pretending they understand. He saw the water. He saw the distance. He saw the cuff of Rowan's jacket not quite hiding a wrist and the way my shoulders had decided against themselves. He did not look at the bed because a lounge doesn't have one. He looked at the nearest exit, then at me, then at the boarding pass on the table. "Okay," he said softly. He has always known where to put volume. "You gave him a +1, I said, and set the pass down like evidence that had earned a table. "You gave him my name." "I gave him the hour I didn't know how to give myself," Theo said. "He didn't attempt to reach for my hands. He has been taught that lesson more than once, and I admire him when he remembers." I cheated. I told myself it was weather. I told myself home is a noun that survives rain. I told myself a lie so simple I wanted to keep it. "You like being two men," I said. The sentence tasted honest and regretful in equal measure. "I liked being applauded by a room that hadn't watched me be kind at 7 a.m., he said. "I liked being early work without having to be better. I liked the cedar. Then I liked the idea of telling you I hated the cedar more than I wanted to stop." "Tell me what you want now," I said. "I want you," he said, with a seriousness that made the carpet shift an inch. "I want to end this without turning him into an essay. I want to sleep on the couch we refuse to call the guest anything. I want to tell you what this has been twice next week, once with the clever words I am paid to organize, and once with the small ones I keep misplacing. I want to be one man again." My mouth softened in spite of me. Loving him had never been the problem. The problem had been the way he told himself stories to make forgiveness look like architecture. I turned to Rowan because rooms deserve equal courage. "What do you want?" "To stop loving the part of me that thrives in wrong rooms," he said. "To stop letting desire pretend it's a plan. To stop being the plot twist he thinks he earns." "Congratulations," I said. "You're halfway to adulthood." He smiled at me rueful and then did an indecently kind thing. He stepped near, lifted a hand, and stopped an inch from my neck. The heat of it existed, the touch did not. That inch was my decision. Every nerve I own got the message and wrote a petition. I denied it gently. "Thank you," he said, and his mouth did something I wish I hadn't noticed. "I'll go, not as punctuation, as information." He left without adding theater to the hallway. The air improved. Theo exhaled and sat. We stared at water like it had a job it wasn't paid enough for. "I'm not leaving tonight," I said. "We are walking home without touching. We are waiting at crosswalks because old knees and stupid decisions both deserve seconds. You are sleeping on the not guest couch. Tomorrow you are ending it with him without compliments. Next week you are telling me what this was twice. I will decide what my hands can hold without lying to my wrists." He nodded. I want to tell you he cried, but he did not, and I loved him again for that. We took the elevator down like we had been allowed reprieve. We did not touch in the taxi. We said nothing to the doorman who knows more about us than we know about ourselves. At home, he arranged a blanket with the dignity of a person who has learned not to plead with fabric. The kettle performed and then boiled. I slept the sleep of a man who has earned nothing and done one thing exactly right. The next day he ended it, not with a text, not with a speech. He came back smelling like nothing and said small words that hurt and helped. He said he had wanted applause, not consequence. He said he had mistaken beginnings for improvements. He said he had been cruel to me in the exact measure he had been lazy with himself. He said he would be one person if I let him do the work. I let him. That is the part that disappoints audiences and saves kitchens. He slept on the couch for 6 nights and learned the shape of our bedroom door from a distance. On the 7th, he came back to bed and his mouth remembered lazy precision, and I remembered forgiveness without romance. We began again like people who have made a decision that does not deserve confetti. Rowan texted one sentence 3 days later. "Thank you for letting me tell the truth in a room with light." I wrote back, "Try telling it in rooms that don't love you." He didn't answer, which was a second kindness. Work didn't become sacred. It became honest. I painted open for a bakery that wanted mirrors and gave them air instead. The owner framed the space with 2 ferns like a handshake he could keep. I fixed an old camera whose shutter refused to admit time could be measured gently. I changed a spring that had forgotten tension was a verb, and let the lens remember focus is not a brag. A week after the lounge, I ran into Rowan outside the museum. He looked smaller, or maybe my anger had stopped holding him up. He said hello with exactly the amount of shame that allowed me not to hate him. We stood under the awning like weather that had agreed to behave in traffic. "I will not make a speech," he said. "Good," I said. "You were always better without stages." At dinner that night, Theo asked if I wanted to talk about anything other than stew. I said no. He laughed in relief. Our kitchen learned to let the kettle be ridiculous again. We put down 2 glasses before sentences, and sometimes we left the glasses alone. The museum sent him to announce a donor's kindness. He said he would rather come home, and I said yes. He came home smelling like paper and apology and bed. Here is the part where the elements you think of as erotic refuse to leave and refuse to define anything either. I woke to the weight of his arm and the unapologetic heat of a man who had not assumed he was owed. It reminded me I have nerves and a mouth, and a right to decide in the morning who those belong to. I turned into him and let my lips find the place that has always been ours. It wasn't a finale. It was a continuity, lazy and precise, the mouth version of a brush laying gold thin enough to breathe. If another boarding pass appears with my name and his seat, I will bring water. I will sit near the door because exits are facts, not dares. If desire arrives, it can be a visitor, not a command. If a hand reaches for my neck, I will decide without asking fantasy to pay the rent tomorrow. I will keep choosing repair over spectacle, not because repair is holier, but because it is how mornings stay possible. The world will keep inventing cedar. I will keep trusting kitchens. And when I write the next sign on glass, I will leave space around the letters on purpose. And I will think of the night we let the room have light instead of audience. And I will call that small air the most difficult part to paint, and the only part anyone feels.